There we are, Ron, right smack in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. How cool is that? Are you kind of blending, though? You're kind of a watery color.
Oh, am I? Okay.
I'm in a boat. You're surrounded by sharks. I'm laughing at you.
Oh, well, that's the kind of guy you are, Ed.
Well, hopefully we'll never find
Actually, Ed, that's not the kind of guy you are.
No, hopefully we'll never really know what kind of guy I am in that situation or what kind of guy you are, because I have a feeling that either one of us would be pretty tasty from a shark's point of view. I don't know how I started the show off talking about sharks. We're going to talk about Steve King, which is...
Well, he's a political shark.
Political shark. We're going to talk about Branstad and his ridiculous campaign promises, which, despite being ridiculous, he continues to stick by. We're going to talk about a new U.S. Senate candidate, Mark Jacobs, who is right smack there in the climate denier camp. And we're going to talk with State Representative Dan Kelly later in the program. Also, a Democratic candidate for governor, Bob Kraus, joining us. And Dr. Rachel McNair, who I'm very excited about having us on the program here in a bit. But let's kick it off, Ron. Let's wrap up one conversation. Zimmerman, you've got some thoughts on the Zimmerman trial, and I want you to get it off your chest before everyone else is so dumb.
To me, it's
with
just simple.
Yeah.
Zimmerman was in the wrong the second he disregarded police counsel and advanced into a situation he was incompetent to control, and then he brought along a gun to exasperate his incompetence into tragedy.
But he wasn't planning to cause trouble. I mean, who knows? Maybe he carried a gun every time he went out on the watch. And I'm not justifying that, but I'm saying that, well, the order of your sentence troubles me a little bit, just in terms of logic.
He did not do what was advised to him. He went against the advice. He was incompetent to deal with the consequences. I think that's the key word, is incompetence. He could not control a scrawny kid, and he let the situation, he escalated the situation until it spun out of control, and then he decided his only recourse was to shoot the kid. And I got to look at that, and I got to wonder, my big question is, why does George Zimmerman have the fan club that he has? Are there so many people who, I don't know, do they kind of find a kin spirit and the incompetence? Here's kind of a fellow who doesn't know what he's doing. They feel they don't know what they're doing, but they feel if they have a gun, if they're packing heat, that will make up for their incompetence.
Do you feel this story is going to go away?
I think it's going to be in decline, but it's going to kind of enter the lexicon. It's going to be one of those reference stories that every once in a while bounces back.
Now, is it going to set a precedent for how the court responds in similar cases in the future? Or is it going to be one of those footnotes in the book where we say, oh, gosh, here's an example of how wrong justice can turn out?
It raised the issue of the stand your ground law that's popular and has been passed in a number of states. And if it compels a more serious discussion about that law, I think that would be a good thing. I think it already has. I think that it's just, people are just kidding themselves if they think packing heat, carrying a gun, that will kind of make them competent in a dangerous situation, right, that they'll be able to handle it. Because clearly the Zimmerman situation was proof against that.
Yeah. Well, and we may have more conversation about this if it moves to an appeal, if there is some kind of a lawsuit involved. We'll see. We're going to shift gears, though. We've got a lot to talk about today, including a conversation with Dr. Rachel McNair, who you've spoken with about our long-intended conversation on consistent life perspective. Right. Dr. McNair, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Hello.
Yes.
And I believe you're out in mountain time somewhere.
I am. I'm in a cabin in Colorado.
Oh, go ahead. Rub that in.
I know. I'm no fool. I get out of the heat in the summertime.
Actually, we've had really darn good weather here, so I can't complain. The only missing here is the cabin. We've got the cool weather. We just don't have the cabin.
Yeah.
So, consistent life perspective. Maybe, Ron, kick us off with your description of what that means, and then we can ask Dr. McNair to jump in.
Dr. McNair will likely have her own way of phrasing it. But to me, the appealing thing about the consistent life perspective is it addresses the basic problem of violence. Violence is kind of an interesting phenomenon in human affairs. Everyone has their favorite form of violence, or most people have their favorite form of violence. And they tend to believe that, well, they can control that violence under certain circumstances and a good will result. Everyone will be better off. And I don't buy into that. I don't buy into that on religious grounds.
Well, I don't buy into the premise that everybody has, quote, their own personal type of violence.
Everyone has most people, I should say that, most people have a form of violence that they believe to be justifiable, that they believe will accomplish a good. Dr.
McNair, you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think that was a good way of saying it, but what I would add is that, in addition, the kinds of violence tend to be connected to each other. You can link them. The kind of psychological dynamics that lead to violence, such as using euphemisms, considering the victim either blameworthy or not even human, or being motivated by greed, being motivated by apathy, just if you look into it, there's just huge amounts of ways where there are links, and then you can be more specific, so that, for instance, because we do military spending, therefore we're not spending enough on social programs, and therefore have more poverty, so there's a direct connection. And then, of course, part of the social programs that are most strongly needed are those that support pregnant women, so that they can feel comfortable giving birth to their children and raising them well. And that's one of the things that would prevent abortion.
Okay,
which is another form of violence, which also goes in with all the dehumanizing the victim and so forth. So
I don't know how. I mean, we could get pretty deeply into the conversation about what is violence, what is nonviolence, and I've long been a student of Mahatma Gandhi and an advocate for nonviolence. But it seems to me the central concern about the consistent life perspective, that conversation is relevant to, maybe, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think the central concern, the central issue is the issue of abortion.
Well, basically, that's the reason that we have organized abortion and euthanasia. Because otherwise we could just, the piece of it as a whole does tend to link issues. It's a very common thing. And so when people start saying, well, now the pro-life point of view is making sense to us when it is presented the right way, not by some of the politicians, but with a concern for everyone involved, that of course we're going to link issues, because as peace movement people, that's the way we think.
So in your opinion, is a position in favor of euthanasia, and again, let me phrase that from a very individual point of view. If somebody wants to die, is that an act of violence?
It is, and the basic problem is that the, quote, right to die becomes a duty to die in about 2 seconds flat.
But what if that's
basically what you're saying in the case of euthanasia is that everybody else who is in a state of high distress is entitled to suicide prevention programs, but we're going to make exceptions for people who are terminal or for people who have disabilities. And of course, it becomes especially vicious when it's aimed at people with disabilities who, that's why we have the group Not Dead Yet. They're saying, excuse me, don't tell us that our lives aren't worthy.
Okay, so I'm suffering from a terminal disease, or I'm in a horrible accident. I'm conscious. I know what's going on. I have no prospects of a decent life left. To me, that's circumstance racking violence on my body and on my mind. Maybe I offer the less violent option of assisted suicide. Well, what is wrong with that paradigm?
The right to die becomes a duty to die in 2 seconds flat.
And I would also ask, Ed, if you are aware of your situation, if you are you have your faculties, why do you assume you would not have any sort of quality of life.
Well, maybe I've lost both arms. Maybe I've lost. Who knows what I've lost?
Okay,
there are lots of people who've lost both arms that would jump up and say, "Excuse me."
Right, but I'm just. I mean, maybe it's worse than that. Maybe it's so bad I'm going to be bedridden for the rest of my life, even though my mind may be functional, or maybe I can see it coming where my mind is not going to be functional, and I don't feel like. I feel like that level of violence is not something I want to deal with. I'd rather just say, "Hey, I've had enough. I'm going out."
What does that mean to other people in that circumstance?
That they should make their own personal decision as to what.
Is that the way it works, or are you?
I have a quality of life that I do not want people disparaging like that and putting me down for. Now, it is true that if you're in a situation where you, by golly, are going to die and you don't want heroic measures done, you can say, and this has always been true, if the medical care itself is burdensome, you can say, no, don't do that to me. But if what you're saying is, I'm going to have some severe challenges here, then I think what you would find is that if you actually got into that situation, you would start saying, how dare everybody tell me that I don't, that my life isn't worth living.
All right, so what about, let me give you this example. Gandhi goes on a hunger strike, and he did that a lot of times, and once
he did.
Once it was 21 days. Actually, a shorter hunger strike toward the end of his life nearly killed him. It very well could have killed him. Was that wrong?
I would say probably so. Yeah.
Okay, so the prophet of nonviolence himself would have been in that case committing an act of violence.
I don't know if Gandhi was a prophet of nonviolence.
Would question that, but he did say that it seemed as clear as daylight to him that abortion would be a crime.
Okay,
so,
yeah.
When we're dealing with, and of course in the case of abortion, we also oftentimes have the unborn child has disabilities, and so people say, oh, well, isn't that a reason then to... I mean, a lot of people who don't like abortion in general will say, oh, but if the child has disabilities. But then again, the disabilities rights community is really upset and has good reason to be. Right now, 90% of children diagnosed in the womb with Down syndrome, roughly, in the United States are being aborted. And Down syndrome is not, I mean, to say that that's so bad that it's worth being killed over is really bizarre.
But what I'm saying is, I respect individual freedom. I respect a right, an individual's right to choose a lot of different things in their life, including, in the case of the mother, whether they should carry a child that, for whatever reason to them, it presents a difficult option. I respect somebody's right to say that, my life is miserable and I'm not going to continue it anymore. And again, I'm not condoning suicide for, in somebody who is otherwise, just dealing with trauma.
But that's why people commit suicide. They decide their life is miserable and they're going to end it.
Right.
Let me point. This is really important. You used the word mother. The word mother implies a relationship to somebody. Okay? That means that in the very thing that you were saying, you were agreeing that there was somebody there. Now, the idea that killing somebody is a solution to a problem, in the first place, it's wrong, but in the second place, you're going to find that when you use violence as a solution for a problem, it ends up smacking you in the face. It makes a very poor long-term solution. And furthermore, as soon as you say, oh, well, we'll give the mother the choice, I'm telling you that if we gave women choice, it was her choice, no pressure, totally her choice, the abortion rate would plummet. Because what's happening right now is that we have the father of the child putting pressure on her. If she's a teenager, her parents putting pressure on her, the employer putting pressure on her. What we need is a society that says it is not right to put pressure on a pregnant woman.
Rachel, I've got to run to a break. You are welcome to stick around with us to the through the second segment, but if you've got to go, I totally understand. What's your preference?
No, I'm sticking around.
You're sticking around. Okay, good. Well, Rachel McNair, folks, and Ron Yarnell in the studio. We're discussing the consistent life ethic. And I think there are probably other aspects of this as well that we can talk about. I do want to thank our sponsors, the Iowa chapter of the Sierra Club, also Iowa Physicians for Social Responsibility, and the Great March for Climate Action. I want to thank Gateway Marketing Cafe for sponsoring this segment of our program. And Dan Kelly doesn't know this yet, but we're having lunch at Gateway Cafe. Yes, we are. Also, I want to thank the Immigrant Entrepreneur Summit and their great event coming up in November at Drake University. I want to thank Diana's Wedding Cakes and also Community CPA and Associates, and one of my favorite restaurants, Hawk Restaurant in the East Village, where 90% of what you eat comes from local farms and local producers. We'll be back in just 2 minutes.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little, until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
Well, good morning. This is the 7th of June in the Lord's year 2010, and this is day 1 of webcast1live.com. We will begin with Max World Live with my special guest, Tom Coates. In just a minute, there's Tom. Wait. Howdy. And we will be live for the very first time on Webcast One Live. Someday we're going to look back on this and say, gosh, remember that old day in history? Wonder where Walter Cronkite was. He must have been around hanging there too. But actually, it's the beginning of Webcast One Live. And thank you for listening. Thanks, Rob Spearman, and everybody who's put together this project together. And we're ready to go live now. So thanks for listening to MaxWorldLive.com.
I can't tell you that it's going real well from time to time, but it is going.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
That's Ode to Jones by Mr. Baber's Neighbors, and we're back to the conversation here on the Fallon Forum, broadcasting live from the Skywalk in downtown Des Moines, where they are setting up for the Italian Festival. So, Ron, get your Italian on. Get your bocce ball arm in play because there's big stuff. Okay, whatever. Yeah. Anyway, we're back to a very serious conversation. Later in the program, Democratic candidate for governor Bob Kraus joining us, as is State Representative Dan Kelly. We've got a few things to talk about. A lot of open time on that conversation, but we got to talk a little bit about Steve King's most recent crazy talk on immigration, which has actually landed him some pretty stern criticism from two of the leading Republicans in the U.S. House.
Aren't you proud, Ed, as an Iowan, to know that Steve King is probably the most nationally prominent congressman from Iowa? He represents us to the rest of the nation.
I would be really proud of a Republican, a reasonable Republican, who would beat him in the primary. And that's one thing I want to talk about next is, too, who can we recruit to run against King in the primary.
So you don't like the idea that Steve King is the face of Iowa to the other 49 states?
No, I really hope I hope people around the country realize that that's not us. That's an anomaly. That's a mistake. I know the mistake keeps getting reelected, but. All right, let's go back to our conversation. Rachel McNair is with us on the phone from Colorado, I believe.
Yes.
And
well, I live in Kansas City.
You what?
I live in Kansas City.
Ah.
I mean, when you said Iowa Physicians for Social Responsibility, and I was saying, oh, yes, because we had this nuclear weapons vote a while back, last April in Kansas City, and so a lot of those folks were helping us out with trying to oppose the building of new nuclear weapons, the new plant there.
Right.
So we had a lot of interaction with y'all folks.
Well, let's talk more about the consistent life ethic as it relates to peace, as it relates to the death penalty. But I gotta just throw one more thing at you, okay? My dad died in 2008 of cancer, and he lived about 10 years longer than the doctors said he would. He battled that thing fiercely. I mean, there was nothing left of the guy when he was done, except a continued good sense of humor, and I admire him for that. But my brothers and I, we kind of agreed that's not how we want to go. And I remember standing around with my brother Bill, who's a big bicycling guy. I mean, you think I'm a big bicycling guy, Ron? You should see this guy.
You're a big bicycling guy.
Well, this guy's bigger. He bikes up Mount Washington, all right? And he said, if he gets to the point in life where it's just looking really, really bad like that, before he gets to that point, he wants us to strap him to his bike and just push him down Mount Washington. One final hell of a ride. I mean, so...
Well, I can tell you that is two things. One is if you don't feel like fighting for your life, if you think it's time to just sit down and go, nobody has to have medical care inflicted on them that they don't wish. I mean, that's always been a basic thing. Medical care always comes with your consent. But the other thing is that when you yourself are in that situation, you better reserve yourself the right to change your mind.
Well, that's a good point. When you're confronted with it, you might want to change your mind.
Dr. McNair, I'd like to ask your perspective on one thing that bothers me. Seems to me that the biggest mistake that's ever happened to the pro-life movement is that it's become a subsidiary of the Republican Party. And I think that you have made comments regarding your own experience with partisan politics, how unhelpful that can be, that party politics, partisan politics has an agenda that is not necessarily helpful.
Well, and I strongly say this is right, that of that part of the pro-life movement that is too much attached to the Republican Party, it is badly hurting the movement. But I would hasten to point out that the opposite is also true. The Democratic Party is really hurting itself with its abortion availability advocacy. It sometimes goes to extremes.
Abortion availability advocacy? I mean, again, what's wrong with just saying, okay, people have the right to make these choices? I mean, that's not advocating for abortion. That's just advocating for freedom.
No, it's not. It's advocating for abortion.
I don't think so.
It is advocating for abortion. If you look at the rhetoric and what they actually end up doing, I mean, they have done things like say, we can't have this program that helps pregnant women unless it also refers for abortions. They have done some things that have really been turning a lot of people off. And the thing that bothers me is that when they will try to do things that are good, a lot of times that their abortion position will be interfering with that, and they aren't paying attention and noticing that, and sometimes they're losing elections over it that would have been better not lost.
Well, sometimes they win elections over it. So.
on the partisans on both sides are getting all messed up on this issue.
I think overall, since the 1970s, that the Democratic Party embracing a radical pro-choice position has really hurt the party more than it's helped, and it really is a gift that keeps on giving to Republicans.
What is radical about saying
Abortion
you have a right to make a choice with something that is in your body?
What is
your
that something, Ed?
It is a fetus, and there's going to be
a fetus?
There's going to be a discussion between now and the end of time.
It's a human being.
Well, and it's a human being of a very, very different condition. And again, it is entirely dependent upon that woman. Why should she not be able to make that decision?
There are human beings of all kinds of different conditions. Why is being a fetus the most hazardous?
To me, what's radical is saying that woman has to do something that someone else wants her to do with something that's entirely contained within her.
Don't we all have to do things that other people tell us to do?
If we're talking about abortion, it is very frequently imposed on women. And this concept that it's somehow her choice requires that we not live in a patriarchal sexist society, and I'm afraid we still do.
How is it imposed on women? How is pro-choice imposing a decision on a woman?
Well, for one thing, several women are outright coerced in it, and I will tell you
what do you mean?
That I can name you dozens and dozens of cases where a woman was killed because she refused to get an abortion. Now, of course, it's still quite illegal to kill a woman, and the punishments are heavy. But
this sounds very anecdotal, actually.
One woman who is killed because she refuses to get an abortion, there have to be dozens, at least, maybe hundreds, maybe thousands of women who are beat up or who are pressured very
Can I see the data on that? Can I see some stats? That sounds extremely anecdotal.
And don't you think that parents...
That show that the majority of women state that they were pressured.
And don't you think that happens...
that only give it at a third.
Don't you think it happens when a 17-year-old girl finds herself pregnant, that her parents sit down and they go, honey, you don't really want to make the rest of your life more difficult, do you? Because we had such great plans for you. And she's like, well, I don't know.
Well, they could just as well make the other argument.
And that's a good argument to make.
Well, I mean, why? They're your parents. I guess they're entitled to make.
And
parents you're entitled to ignore them as well.
No, you can't ignore your parents. They're your parents.
Well, I mean, I've been doing a lot of that throughout my life.
Well, I mean, that's pressure. When your boyfriend or your husband says, I'm not into this, and if you go through with this, I'm out of here. That's pressure.
But the pressure goes either way.
If you have an economic system which makes no provision for child raising and pregnancy, that's pressure.
Yes.
And again, I'm saying the pressure happens in either direction. And that to me is just the kind of intelligent conversations you have with people who are important to you, who you respect, who are valuable in your life. You're going to have those conversations on either way.
But those conversations are laden with pressure, with agendas, with interests, and with being a human being.
In both directions.
And one direction is better than the other direction.
The best direction is for the person who is the only one who is carrying that child, the only one who is affected by it directly, personally, intimately, internally. That person has the right to make that choice. Well,
okay,
I don't see why that's so hard.
Because this is what I hear.
I am the only person in this conversation who has been pregnant.
I think so.
It's not a situation dire enough to be worth killing somebody over in order to avoid.
And again, my point is that life is in an entirely different status. And
compared to what?
Compared to you or I, or someone once you're out of the womb, then there's no argument.
Yes, there is. There's a lot of arguments.
Well, I mean, I don't know anybody.
There's a lot of serious arguments. There's a lot of serious pressure on.
I don't know anybody who argues that life begins at age 1. I think we can. The argument is over whether life begins at conception or birth.
Life doesn't begin at conception; it continues.
Okay.
I mean, I'm serious. Yeah. I mean, that's semantic gymnastics that people use. But life is a continuous process, and it's human life because unless you can find out what else it is, I'd have to say if a human body generates it, it must be human. If
the show were to last another 4 hours, we could still be talking about this issue. I am confident, but I'd like to hear a little bit more. We've only got a couple minutes left, Rachel, but what your take on what we refer to as issues of war and peace? That's a big life issue as well.
Well, it's a huge life issue, and you also mentioned the death penalty.
Yes, that too.
And of course, poverty is a huge life issue as well, and lethal kinds of discrimination such as racism and misogyny and prejudice against those with disabilities. But in all of these cases, we have people who are arguing that the people being killed aren't really human. Or have given up being human in the case of the death penalty, have given up rights of being human. It is a common thing to use euphemisms. You know, the what you do in a battle is an operation. The use of what we call moral disengagement mechanisms.
Well, let me ask you regarding war. Is there any case in which you would feel that war was that armed conflict was acceptable? For example,
okay, well, we're talking about the difference between pacifism and the just war theory,
right?
And as a Quaker, I am a pacifist, but in consistent life movement, we do have people who abide by the just war theory and its very stringent rules. What I would point out is that if you were to apply those rules to wars that actually happened, you would be hard-pressed to find one that fits them.
Well, one more quick question.
You could find one or two, but you could not. It certainly wouldn't apply to the ones that the United States has been running for the past several years.
Yeah, and I agree 100%. I cannot think of a war since World War II that makes any sense to me at all. But I look at World War II specifically, and I look at what Dietrich Bonhoeffer, a Lutheran minister, did with the Passover plot to attempt to assassinate Adolf Hitler, and I'm thinking, the guy had the right idea. In that case, Hitler was so evil, it made sense to me that he was. But
Bonhoeffer never justified his involvement. He just said, "I don't know what else to do." He never put out a justifying rationale. And World War II also did not conform to the just war theory because waging war on civilians was a basic Allied strategy.
And in addition, there were all kinds of things that could have been done to prevent World War II that were not done. And the pacifists were frantic trying to get people to do things to oppose Hitler early on when it would have been much less costly. And people simply weren't paying attention and were allowing him to grow into a monster. So one of the main things about opposing war is not to sit around coming up with these scenarios where it might be justified, but to say, how do we nip it in the bud? How do we pay attention to when it's earlier and easier to keep things from growing into monstrous proportions to begin with?
Well, Rachel, I'm really sorry I have to go. I've got a couple other guests waiting to join us for other conversations. We could probably do an entire program on any one of these topics. This is fascinating. And I really appreciate you taking the time to join us. Dr. Rachel McNair, folks, among other hats she wears, she's with the American Psychiatric Association. Do I have that right? Psychological Association. I want to thank Ron Yarnell for joining me today and for also making contact with Dr. McNair to invite her to the program. Hopefully others have enjoyed the conversation as much as I have.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. We'll be back in a few minutes. Again, Ron, thank you. And we'll be back in a few minutes. State Representative Dan Kelly is joining us along with a Democratic candidate for governor, Bob Kraus. I do want to thank the Immigrant Entrepreneur Summit for sponsoring this most recent segment of our program and encourage you to go to IES.org to learn more about how you can sign up to start, grow, and improve your business. They've got some great skills and great workshops planned. Also want to thank the Fighting Burrito in Ames and in Des Moines. Also Max Wellman Trio and Ritual Cafe down on 13th and Locust. We'll be back in just 2 minutes.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm Brian Leach, owner and general manager of Service Legends. I brought along a couple of the home comfort heroes.
Hi, I'm Tammy Wells.
I am Nick Wondershot.
I am administrative manager.
I am the senior technician
from Service Legends.
It seems like every good thing, when you feel it to the bone that it's good, there's a lot of hard work put behind it. I don't think that you can fake it and have it turn out good.
You know, if we seem like, okay, that's just weird, it's just a furnace, why would you believe so deeply in a furnace? It's not just that, you know, we want to show the world that you can have good service.
Yeah, I mean, it's your home.
You know, it's built into our daily trainings, it's built into our culture, that we're going to do whatever it takes to have each client say they love us, period.
That's why we spend all the hours in the training that we do. And if we guarantee it's going to be a good experience for you, or else it's free, what type of work do you think we're going to do?
There is a guarantee.
Temperature selection guarantee, fixed rider it's free guarantee, comfort guarantee, best value guarantee. All of these guarantees hold us accountable to ensuring that we exceed your expectations. And if for whatever reason we'd fail and we can't make it right, we guarantee all of those guarantees with a 100% money back guarantee.
I mean, if you don't think that your technician can fix it right, are you going to say that to a client? No.
You don't have to worry about having a technician come to your house.
We drug test, background check all of our team members. We put safe people in your home. Each and every one of our service techs, 400 hours a year in training.
You tell it the minute they walk in the door. They know what they're doing, they've done their homework, and they actually truly care about what you want.
Because at the end of the day, you're the person that makes sure I have a job.
They're going to be listening. They're going to want to know what your challenges are. Then they're going to come and give you options, and you get to choose.
If I'm there to help and I make it easy and painless, I did my job right that day.
Well, when it comes to your comfort, safety, and your family, you know, you don't necessarily go buy the most expensive, but you get the most bang for your buck.
Oh, it's worth it, because there's a lot of people that will find a way to get it to work right now and then leave and then come back, charge you again, and the cycle just repeats itself. So when I'm out there looking at the furnace, I want to find why it failed today. How can we change the part today with something that you're not going to have to worry about? Is it worth changing the part today? I mean, you can put a lot of money into a furnace. I can fix parts all day. There's good job security in that for me, but is it the right thing for you?
I get a lot of the phone calls of after the technicians are there. They're just in awe. They're like, wow, you guys are great. I mean, I don't even know what to say. You guys are great. Everything you did was perfect. It was great.
Keep going though, I like this.
Just give us a try. I'm gonna take all the risk.
I've got the time to make this right. I've got the support to make it right.
Just check us out.
And if you don't see the value in what we do,
I mean, fixed rider, it's free or 100% money back.
enough said.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I'm not the guy who cared about love. I'm not the guy who cared about fortunes and such.
Welcome back to the Fallon Forum. That's Max Wellman. Always love a little of Max's music. I do want to thank, the Fighting Burrito for helping to sponsor this segment of our show. And also want to tip my cap to Community CPA and Associates and all the other businesses that make this program possible. Please go to the website, fallonforum.com. And if you can, patronize the businesses that do help support the show. Sergeant's Garage as well, if you need your car fixed. I've had 4 generations of my cars fixed by Graham Gormley at Sergeant's Garage. S&P Piano, you've got a piano that needs moving? Well, I know the guys who can do it. They're funny, and they've got great backs, and they've got incredible equipment to know how to move these things. So give them a shout as well. Again, all that information on the Fallon Forum website under the business sponsors. So, all right, just when you think maybe there'll be nothing to talk about, Steve King comes along and he makes it easy. Steve King, though, is so out there on this that he's getting pushback from the leaders in his own party, in his own chamber. I mean, this is to me just absolutely incredible. Okay, so he was on the American Action Network. That's a very conservative program, and the American Action Network is the conservative group that is supportive of immigration reform. Sorry, I botched that. And they released a poll showing that voters in King's district, his own district, support a pathway to citizenship by 68%. Okay, so that doesn't stop King, though, from saying, from labeling undocumented immigrants as drug traffickers. I mean, this is getting play all over the country, in fact, beyond our country, internationally. And so bad that King is getting criticized by Tom Latham. Maybe this isn't criticism, but Tom Latham says he deplored the rhetoric that has accompanied the immigration debate. He never actually criticizes King. He just deplores the rhetoric without mentioning King. And then he says that unfortunately the heated and unfortunate language is just making it more difficult to get anything done. But King is criticized by John Boehner, by Eric Cantor. What do you guys think of this latest King dust-up? State Representative Dan Kelly's with us, and a Democratic candidate for governor, Bob Kraus. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Ed.
Good to be here. Well, if King had his way, the immigration reform bill would become the uniform xenophobia bill. This fellow is really bad news. I've caught his. He came up on my radar a few years ago in my veterans activist work when he advocated that if an American soldier was killed in combat and that American soldier had an overseas wife, that wife would not be allowed to come to the United States. Just insane cruelty and stupidity. I cannot say enough about this guy. I think the thing that the Republican leadership has to do, and I think Nancy Pelosi as the head Democrat has to advocate, is that we have to remove him as the head of the immigration subcommittee. That's the first thing that has to happen. I think every good Democrat and Republican and independent in this state needs to contact Speaker Boehner's office and tell him to get King off the committee.
Yeah, I mean, Boehner says he calls King's comments wrong and described King's language as hateful. And Eric Cantor calls the remarks inexcusable. You would think that would be enough if the remarks are hateful and inexcusable. You would think that would be enough to demote the guy to a position where he's not going to have so much influence on this issue.
Absolutely. The fact that his own leadership and his constituents strongly disagree with him, it kind of speaks for itself.
68%.
Right. He's just trying to create controversy, keep his name out there, and frankly, we shouldn't feed into it. I mean, he just wants attention. That's all this is about.
Yeah.
Well, why do you think he wants to? I mean, what does he have to gain by getting attention? I think he actually really believes this. This is who he is. This is what he believes. He knows this is not good for him politically, but he can't help himself because this is what he believes.
Well,
I think that's true.
Yeah, I think he does actually believe this, but he goes out and says it. That's the problem. He says it and he believes it, and he shouldn't be. Not only should he not be in charge of that committee, he shouldn't be in office.
There's about 5,000 Dreamers in this state that were directly maligned by this fellow. And one of them, I happen to know, a young lady from Fairfield that came over. Her parents were actually ministers, and they overstayed their visa, but she was with them, and she got a track scholarship to Graceland College, and she's still going to college down there. But she's categorized in with a group of drug smugglers. That's absolutely wrong. It's slanderous. You can't say enough bad about what has occurred, not only to this one individual, but those 5,000 and the image of the state of Iowa. Here, Branstad is talking about wanting to get another 200,000 people here.
He wants to create 200,000 jobs, and they're claiming that there's no way to do that without getting more people. But I want to switch gears to Branstad's job creation myth. But let's finish up with King. What you basically propose, Bob, that we should put pressure on the House leadership, Cantor, Boehner, maybe others, to remove King from any position of influence where he has any kind of a bully pulpit on this issue. My feeling is, as long as he's a congressman, he's going to have a bully pulpit. So maybe that would be a small step forward, but he's still going to be able to say these things as long as he is in Congress.
Well, I think we've got a great candidate out there, Jim Maurer, as a Democrat. He came back to Iowa. I knew Jim when he was ran Joe Biden's field operation in Iowa. I think he's good, and I know you have some advocacy thoughts as to what could be done within the Republican Party. Of course, I can't speak for the Republican Party.
What do you think, Dan? I mean, does a Democrat stand a chance of beating Steve King? I mean, I know you've got to say yes, but honestly, really, Christy Vilsack couldn't do it. Does any Democrat really stand a chance to beat him?
I think to beat somebody that says stuff like this, yes, we've got a chance to beat him.
But he's been saying it for so long.
Well, again, he's just looking for attention. The next time he says something, okay, but the next time he says something like this, let's just ignore it. Let's just not even pay attention. Let's just ignore it. Let's get behind the candidate that's running against him and
but the candidate running against him is going to talk about it.
Well, I mean, that's what they.
This what's his name again?
Jim Maurer.
Jim Maurer's not going to ignore this, and nor should he.
No, he shouldn't.
I mean, if you had an opponent who came out with some crazy talk, you'd remind your constituents, right?
As an opponent.
Yeah, as an opponent.
Right, as an opponent. But it seems like every time King decides he wants to be on the front page of the paper, he just opens his mouth and comes up with one of these. It's almost like watching pro wrestling, Ed. I mean, it's just it's a joke, and I think we ought to just kind of turn our cheeks next time and just let the guy ruin himself.
It would be a joke, except for the fact that he is tainting all of Iowa. I mean, this is a reflection on us. We're the state that has all this history of court rulings on freedom of freeing the slaves, on segregation, on women's rights, on gay marriage. And now we've got crazy talk Steve King in Western Iowa making us look like we're on the other side of the political spectrum.
We have every reason to be outraged and upset about what he says, but he does it over and over and over, and he's just playing a game.
And he's winning. He beats every Democrat who runs against him. He beats Christy Vilsack, the strongest Democrat that has ever been fielded against him, in a new district that included Story County. He beats her even.
The demographics of the district are tough. It's 57.
They're better than they were.
Yeah, they're better than they were, but it's still about 57% Republican.
No, I think it's less than that, isn't it?
The data I heard was 57%. I think that was when Christie ran. So it's still pretty bad, and so you've got you've got to turn around. You got to make a net 14-point shift, and that's at equilibrium.
All right. Well, much like you're familiar with the McLaughlin Group, right? Well, like the McLaughlin Group, I have the right answer. The right answer is King needs a primary opponent, a Republican who's reasonable. I mean, I know you're both Democrats. You're going to run against. You're always going to be running against a Republican,
right?
And there's going to be distinctions. But if you compare where some Republicans are at versus Steve King, they won't embarrass Iowa. They will probably even be doing some stuff that actually helps people in the district.
Right.
I mean, people like Brent Segrist. Remember, Brent Segrist barely lost that primary to Steve King back in 2002. He barely lost. Let's go out there and recruit Brent Segrist to run in the primary. Heck, I would even like to see Chris Rance take a shot at him. I mean, Chris Rance and I fought all the time in the State House, and you never served with Rance.
No, I did not.
Yeah, you got out. I mean, he got out the same time I did, I guess.
I believe a couple years.
Couple years after.
Well, it was a couple years before I got there.
Yeah. So I think yeah. So, but I mean, Chris Rance is not going to say this kind of stuff. He's he's bright. I mean, King is bright. He's just out there on his own turf doing stuff that is hurting people.
Well, I think for the good of the Republican Party, you've got the right answer. And one of the reasons is that they have to refocus what they stand for. And after the general, they came out, many of their leaders said they needed to get the Hispanics back. Well, guess what?
This
Steve
is really
King
helping.
in there, they're not going to get the Hispanics ever.
No. Yeah, he's totally hurting the Republican cause. And I would think that it shouldn't be up to me, a former Democrat, now independent, or you guys, current Democrats, to recruit a Republican opponent for King. The Republican Party should be doing that. And you'd think they'd want to.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's a winner.
Well, if the Republicans aren't willing to do that, maybe I'll have to. Anyway, hey, let's switch gears and talk about state stuff. Okay,
Sure.
This is more your bailiwick anyhow.
Sure.
We're gonna and yours as well because you're running for governor, not Congress.
Yes.
But I want to take a short break. We've got to take a short break here. We've got a few. The Webcast One Live likes to remind folks of the businesses and interests that help make this studio possible. I, of course, need to remind you of the local businesses that make this show possible, and I'll do that when we come back from a short 2-minute break.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
Drug and alcohol addiction slowly steals a person's identity, tearing away pieces of their life little by little until one day it seems like the hope of a happy future is gone and there's no chance of getting it back. Here at St. Gregory Retreat Centers, we can assure you that there is hope. Our unique approach to recovery begins with the understanding that the dysfunction and damage caused by addiction can be overcome, not just dealt with. Don't let another day go by. Call St. Gregory today.
Well, good morning. This is the 7th of June in the Lord's year 2010, and this is day 1 of webcast1live.com. We will begin with Max World Live with my special guest, Tom Coates. In just a minute, there's Tom. Wait. Howdy. And we will be live for the very first time on Webcast One Live. Someday we're going to look back on this and say, gosh, remember that old day in history? Wonder where Walter Cronkite was. He must have been around hanging there too. But actually, it's the beginning of Webcast One Live. And thank you for listening. Thanks, Rob Spearman, and everybody who's put together this project together. And we're ready to go live now. So thanks for listening to MaxWorldLive.com.
I can't tell you that it's going real well from time to time, but it is going.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.
I heard that tune performed live last night at the Raccoon River Brew Pub. That's Mary McAdams, and gosh, she's a local treasure as well when it comes to original tunes and a passionate delivery of things that she wants to say. I want to thank Gateway Market and Cafe for sponsoring this segment of our show, and I guess there's a few of us going for lunch at Gateway after this program. Again, you will like it, Dan.
Absolutely.
I'm confident you will. You've been there before, haven't you?
I've been there with you before. It was very good.
Okay. Bob, you've been to Gateway?
No, I haven't. No, Gateway Market. Yeah, I've been the one on Ingersoll.
Okay.
Yeah,
Near Ingersoll. Woodland, yeah.
Yeah, Woodland.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, and I want to thank Story County Veterinary Clinic as well, Dr. Kim Holding, for helping to sponsor this program, and the Fighting Burrito, and also Hawk Restaurant and Tally's Restaurant. I got several really wonderful restaurant clients, and you can learn more about them on my website. Okay, so Governor Branstad, I remember, maybe you remember too, Dan, back in the 90s, one of his big campaign promise was population growth in every county, and I was always wondering how he's going to fulfill that promise. Right? I mean, how do you really make sure you've got population growth in every county? And of course, he failed dismally. Most counties continued to lose population while he was governor. Most counties are still losing population, and now he's made this pledge of 200,000 jobs, and it ain't adding up. But he's still sticking by it. I mean, what do you do when somebody like the governor makes these kind of campaign promises?
It's smoke and mirrors, and you have to keep pointing it out. If he wanted to increase the number of jobs in Iowa and make connections to different people, you think that he would expand Iowa workforce development. They're the main conduit from jobs to people, and instead, since Branstad's been in office, he has cut the size of the Iowa workforce development by 25%. So how is he going to do it? I don't see the connection between the policy and the talk. Not at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, the workforce office in Newton closed. I know that's doing nothing to help put Iowans into quality jobs on a local level back in my district. And in fact, workforce development has become a computer at the library. And it was just recently announced just earlier this week that the library in Newton is going to drop that program. It's just they're just dropping it.
And why is that?
Well, because it is, they don't have the staff to keep it going. There was never any additional funding given to the libraries for taking on this responsibility. And also the system just simply doesn't work. There's a live chat part of the system. Doesn't work. And I talked to some folks at the library, and they indicated that they had just a very, very difficult time even getting a hold of workforce to get assistance with the website, even to get a return phone call. So the pathetic system that we have is not even being taken care of. So that does nothing to help put folks in 200,000 new jobs. It basically just doesn't.
Yeah, they put boat anchors in libraries and county seat towns across the state, and they're not working. And that's been known for a couple, 3 years since the initiative was taken to close those rural offices.
Yeah.
And in terms of the focus and the emphasis on jobs in rural areas, watch what I do, not what I say.
Right. On a related theme, we've got another candidate for the U.S. Senate. I mean, I don't even know how many people are running on the Republican side now for U.S. Senate. It's a lot. There's one on the Democratic side, and that's Bruce Braley. Mark Jacobs, he's a businessman, and he is quoted in today's paper in Kathy Obradovich's column as saying, regarding global warming, he says, quote, "Our planet warms and cools all the time." I love that. "I will share with you that I'm not convinced that man-made causes are causing these cycles we have, and I'm, in addition, even further less convinced there is anything we can necessarily do about that." So we've got a climate denier running for the U.S. Senate. And, you get back to the jobs issue. There's so much employment opportunity to be had if we start retooling our economy in the direction we need to go to address climate change, to expand opportunities for wind energy, for example, which is a huge issue in your district.
Absolutely.
I mean, how many jobs do you have in wind now in Newton?
About 1,500. And as everyone knows, we're the former home of the Maytag Corporation, where at one time there was up to 5,000 people working on the factory floor, and another 1,000 or so in the corporate offices. And no, the wind industry has not replaced all of those jobs, but it's been had a good impact.
Could it? I mean, could you get to the point where Newton sees that the same number of jobs that were once available in Maytag?
If we start taking the climate situation very seriously, really focus on the energies that are going to help heal our planet and create jobs like wind, solar, I think that every community can benefit. Certainly mine has already.
Governor Branson's approach to job creation have been to take, for example, 25 million more on top of the 60 million already allocated to ORSCOM, and you throw that in with all the other tax credits, and it's over 250 million for what, 140 jobs?
163 jobs.
163 jobs. And then you've got 18 million to Facebook for 31 jobs. I mean, is that, would we see that if Bob Kraus becomes governor, are you going to do something a little different?
I sure hope so. Yeah, if you extrapolate that out, and there is no way that you can buy all those 200,000 jobs. It's virtually impossible. We need to look at existing businesses in Iowa. We need to look at alternative models. If you wanted to look at one small little community, a rural community that has been remarkably successful, you have to look at Fairfield, Iowa. That little town in, I think it was 2010, had 70% of the seed capital startup money that was invested in the state was invested in Fairfield. Why a town of 10,000 would have more seed capital invested than in Des Moines? It speaks to an ethic, but it also speaks to a focus. We need to look at successful small models that we have in Iowa, and then we need to expand on those.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Dan, any further thoughts on that?
I think the challenge really is in rural Iowa. And I think that we all know there are some very progressive, forward-thinking people in Fairfield, and perhaps they've come up with a model we can take a look at. If you don't work on the farm, where are you going to work in rural Iowa? That's the question we need to ask ourselves, and that's the question we need to find an answer to.
Yeah, it's jobs and it's the quality of life.
Right.
You've got to focus on things that will make it pleasant to live in a small county seat town in Iowa.
Right.
Some counties, they've done that. Other counties, they haven't.
Jasper, apparently, and Jefferson, and maybe a bunch of others.
Right. I really believe we need to create a focus on returning some of the manufacturing jobs back to rural Iowa.
The other thing about... Go ahead, Dan.
And that's where green energy comes in.
Well, the other thing that Branstad is not doing is he's not understanding the importance of public sector jobs. I mean, government should never just create jobs because it's not in the job creation business, but it is in the business of providing critical services. And to the extent that those government employees are doing that, those jobs are worth hanging on to. But his goal, it seems, is to privatize as many of those as possible. And along with privatization comes, I think, less accountability and also less good-paying jobs.
Well, we need to look at the genesis of those very good wind power jobs that we have in Iowa.
Right.
A lot of that was government pilot money. One pilot project that I'd like to start on in terms of water quality in this state is something to get the nitrates out of the water. And there's some very low technology digesters that can be put in place that will significantly reduce nitrate pollution in this state. We need to look at appropriate things where the government can be on the cutting edge in devising models that the private sector can pick up.
Well, and again, I hope your campaign, again, I'm not taking sides in the Democratic primary. There are now 3 of you running. Do you see more people getting in?
There's always rumors. And I don't know if we'll have another one this fall or not. It's I think there's people talking, but right now it's still 3.
Right. Mike Gronstal?
That's possible. That's very possible.
He was flirting with running back in 2006.
Yeah, I think there was he and Mike Fitzgerald actually were making some noises. I don't know if either one will come to fruition or not.
All right, Dan, and you have an election as well coming up next year, probably.
Next year,
yeah,
yes, next year.
All right,
and getting busy with fundraising for that.
Yeah,
so
lots of meetings with high priced lobbyists, and start suits and.
Well, and just folks at the coffee shop.
Yeah. That's probably a better
It all
option.
adds up.
All right. All right, folks. Thank you so much for joining the conversation today. We will be back one more program this week. We'll be back tomorrow. Again, I want to thank all of the businesses that help make this show possible, a bunch of great local businesses. I want to thank the Iowa chapter of the Sierra Club, also Iowa Physicians for Social Responsibility, and the Great March for Climate Action. And if you're interested in marching across the country next year to demand action on climate change. If you, I'm going to invite Mark Jacobs to join us since he's still a climate denier, but maybe there's hope. Maybe if he marches with enough people, he'll come around. But if you're interested in marching, give us a shout. That website is climatemarch.org. Again, I want to thank Maddie Kane, my producer. I want to thank Webcast One Live for providing the studio. We'll be back tomorrow.
From the RE/MAX Real Estate Concept Studios, this is Webcast One Live.